Wyoming Territory, winter of 1889. The wind howled like a wounded beast, carrying ice daggers that could pierce a man's soul. Through this white hell rode Jackson Reed, a weathered man of 42, his coat crusted with snow and blood. Some his, most not. His Winchester Model 1873 repeater sat hot against his back despite the cold. 3 horses stolen, 3 of his best quarter horses, worth more than most men made in a year. Jackson had spent the last 6 hours tracking the thieves through the worst blizzard to hit the territory in a decade, following broken branches and blood trails that were rapidly disappearing under fresh powder. The 4440 bullet in his shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. 15 years ago, when he'd served as a Union sharpshooter in the 1st Regiment of Pennsylvania Volunteers, he would have dodged it. Today it found flesh, though he'd put down the man who fired it, a scrawny youngster with dead eyes and the Fisher Gang tattoo on his wrist. A twisted snake wrapped around a dagger. Jackson had seen that mark before, back when the Fisher boys had been Confederate raiders. Now they were just plain raiders. "You picked the wrong ranch," Jackson had told the dying man, before the snow swallowed the corpse and its Remington revolver. As the light faded, Jackson turned his paint horse toward home. His daughter waited, and 6-year-old Sarah was all he had left in this world since Anna had been taken by fever 2 winters past. The thought of his little girl gave him strength to fight the numbness creeping into his limbs as the temperature dropped to 15 below. The ranch appeared through the swirling white, a sturdy 2-story cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a large barn, and 3 smaller outbuildings. From the strategic placement of the structures, a trained eye could see this wasn't just a home. It was a defensible position. His foreman, a former cavalry sergeant, would have the men ready. They all knew the Fishers wouldn't stop with just 3 horses. What Jackson didn't know, couldn't have known, was that his life was about to change because of a letter his daughter had sent 3 weeks ago. A letter to a stranger. Rebecca Morgan had been waiting at the station for 3 days. Her green woolen dress, once fine enough for church back east, was no match for Wyoming winter. Her fingers had gone from red to white to a frightening blue-gray. Still she sat, her small suitcase clutched to her chest like armor. The station master had tried to send her to the boarding house on the first night. By the 3rd, he'd given up asking. "No one's coming for you, miss," he'd said that morning. "Train back east leaves tomorrow." Rebecca merely shook her head. She was 28, no longer the girl who cowered before her father's creditors, no longer the frightened thing who scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled to pay off debts that weren't hers. She had answered an advertisement, spent her last dollars on a ticket west, and she would not leave until she knew for certain. Honest man, widowed, seeks a kind woman to raise his daughter and share a quiet life. Those words had been her salvation, her future, her last hope. The station master was shoveling snow from the platform when the sound of small boots crunching through the fresh powder made Rebecca look up. A little girl with chestnut braids and a woolen bonnet was running toward her, eyes bright with purpose. Behind her, a tall man in a heavy coat struggled to keep pace, his face half hidden by a worn Stetson. "That's her," the child shouted, pointing directly at Rebecca. "That's the one I told you about." The girl stopped before Rebecca, breathless and beaming. "Can you be my mama now?" The platform fell silent. Rebecca stared at the child, then at the approaching man, whose storm-gray eyes widened in confusion. "Sarah," he said sharply, "what are you talking about?" The man, clearly the girl's father, removed his hat, revealing a weathered face with a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. His right arm hung slightly stiff, and Rebecca noticed a dark stain on his coat sleeve. Blood. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, voice like gravel. "My daughter seems confused." Rebecca summoned her remaining strength to stand. "Are you Jackson Reed?" "I am," he replied cautiously. And you are? Rebecca Morgan. I answered your advertisement. For a wife. The color drained from Jackson's face. I never placed any advertisement. Sarah tugged at her father's coat. I did, Daddy. Mrs. Holloway from the school helped me write it. You said Mom isn't coming back, and I need a mama. Understanding crashed over them both like an icy wave. Rebecca felt her world collapsing for the second time in her life. I sat here for 3 days, she whispered, her voice breaking. I have nowhere to go. No money to return east. Jackson opened his mouth to speak when something caught his eye over Rebecca's shoulder. A man across the street, watching them intently from the shadows of the saloon. The observer wore a heavy coat, but Jackson recognized the stance of a gunman. Weight on the balls of the feet, right hand never far from the hip. We should discuss this elsewhere, Jackson said abruptly. He turned to his daughter. Sarah, did you bring anyone else into this scheme of yours? No, Daddy, Sarah replied, confused by his sudden tension. Jackson took Rebecca's suitcase. Miss Morgan, I can't promise anything, but it seems we both have problems that need solving. My ranch is a half-day's ride from town. I can offer you shelter until spring, when the pass is clear. As they walked toward Jackson's wagon, Rebecca felt eyes following them. She glanced back to see the strange man step into the saloon, the tail of his coat revealing a holstered Colt Peacemaker. Who was that man? She asked quietly. Trouble, Jackson replied. The kind that follows you or finds you. Either way, it always comes. The journey to the Reed Ranch was brutal. The wagon pushed through snowdrifts taller than a man, while the wind tried to tear them from their seats. Rebecca huddled under buffalo robes beside Sarah, who chattered endlessly about the ranch, her pony, and how she'd chosen Rebecca's picture from 3 different mail-order bride catalogs. You had the kindest eyes, Sarah explained. Like my mama's. Jackson remained silent, scanning the horizon with the vigilance of a man who expected ambush. When they finally arrived, Rebecca understood why. The Reed Ranch wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. High fences surrounded the main buildings, and the bunkhouse was positioned to provide covering fire for the main house. This was a man who understood defense. Mr. Taylor, Jackson called to an older man emerging from the barn. Any trouble while I was gone? Nothing yet, the foreman replied, his hand resting casually on the butt of his holstered Colt. Found those tracks again by the north fence. They're watching us. Jackson nodded grimly. Double the night watch. And we have a guest. He gestured to Rebecca. Miss Morgan will be staying with us for a while. Taylor tipped his hat to Rebecca, his weathered face revealing nothing. Inside the house, Rebecca found a simple but clean home. A large fireplace dominated the main room, a worn sofa and 2 chairs arranged before it. A kitchen with a cast-iron stove occupied one corner. Stairs led to the second floor. On the mantel sat a daguerreotype of a beautiful woman with Sarah's eyes. Sarah, show Miss Morgan to the spare room, Jackson instructed. I need to check something. As Sarah led her upstairs, Rebecca glanced back to see Jackson at the window, rifle in hand, watching the tree line beyond the corral, with the practiced patience of a predator. Days at the Reed Ranch fell into a rhythm. Rebecca rose before dawn to help the elderly cook prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. Sourdough biscuits, salt pork, and strong coffee. She mended clothes, tended to Sarah, and slowly learned the patterns of this new life. Jackson remained distant, spending his days checking fences, training horses, and preparing for the attack he clearly believed was coming. At night, Rebecca often found him at the kitchen table, cleaning his rifle by lamplight, listening to the wind. On the 5th night, she finally spoke to him directly. Who are they, Mr. Reed? The men you're watching for? Jackson looked up, his hands never pausing in their work. Oil-stained cloth moving methodically over the rifle's action. The Fisher Gang. They started as Confederate raiders, became outlaws after the war. They've been hitting ranches up and down the territory. Is that how you were injured? Your shoulder. Jackson's hand stilled. You notice a lot, Miss Morgan. I had to. Where I came from. Something in her tone made him study her more carefully. You're running from something, too. It wasn't a question, but Rebecca answered anyway. My father died owing money to cruel men. Men who thought a woman alone was easy prey. Jackson nodded slowly. Out here, a woman needs to know how to defend herself. He stood, retrieving a small Smith & Wesson Model 3 revolver from a drawer. Tomorrow, I'll teach you to shoot. That night, while searching for extra blankets, Rebecca discovered a wanted poster hidden in a chest. The faces of the Fisher gang stared back at her, but one made her blood freeze. Silas Fisher. The same man who had threatened her in Boston, who had tracked her father's debts like a bloodhound. He had found her. The next morning, Jackson led Rebecca to a secluded clearing behind the barn. He'd set up empty cans on a fallen log 20 paces away. First rule, he said, handing her the revolver. Treat every gun as if it's loaded. Rebecca took the weapon cautiously. It was heavier than she expected. Second rule, Jackson continued, never point at anything you don't intend to shoot. He moved behind her, adjusting her stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, left foot slightly forward. His proximity made her heart race, but she focused on his instructions. Hold it with both hands, he said, his voice low and steady. Your right hand grips firmly, finger along the barrel until you're ready to fire. Left hand supports from below. She mimicked his instructions, feeling awkward but determined. Now, aim along the sight. The front blade should sit in the notch of the rear sight. Line it up with your target. Rebecca squinted down the barrel at the cans. Both eyes open, Jackson corrected. Take a breath, let half out, then squeeze. Don't pull the trigger. Her first shot went wild, the recoil stronger than she'd anticipated. Again, Jackson said. This time, anticipate the kick. By the 12th shot, Rebecca had hit 3 cans. Not great, but Jackson nodded with approval. You're a quick study. Most folks can't hit anything their first day. I used to throw knives, Rebecca admitted, behind my father's store. Never told anyone. Jackson raised an eyebrow. That explains the eye. Keep practicing every day. Start with 12 shots, clean the gun after. I'll check your progress. Over the next week, Rebecca practiced religiously. Each morning she rose early, took the revolver to the clearing, and fired 12 shots at various targets. Jackson had shown her how to load cartridges, how to clean the cylinder and barrel, how to oil the action to prevent freezing in the cold. By the 7th day, she could hit 8 out of 12 targets consistently. You've got a gift, Jackson said when he observed her practice. Natural marksman. It was the first genuine compliment he'd given her. The shooting lesson came in handy sooner than expected. Before dawn on her 10th day at the ranch, gunfire erupted from the north pasture. Jackson was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Stay with Sarah, he ordered Rebecca, already moving toward the door. Rebecca grabbed his arm. It's the Fisher gang, isn't it? Yes. There's something you should know, she began, but the sound of galloping hooves cut her off. Later, Jackson said, barricade the door behind me. Through the window, Rebecca watched Jackson and his men take defensive positions. The attackers, at least 10 riders, circled the property, firing sporadically. Jackson's men returned fire with disciplined precision, the crack of rifles splitting the dawn air. Sarah appeared beside Rebecca, trembling. Are the bad men here? Yes, sweetheart, Rebecca replied, guiding the child away from the window. But your father knows what to do. A bullet shattered the window, showering them with glass. Rebecca pushed Sarah under the heavy oak table, then grabbed the revolver Jackson had given her. She checked the cylinder, fully loaded, just as she'd been taught. Stay down, she instructed, positioning herself where she could see both doors. The front door splintered under the force of a boot. Rebecca didn't hesitate. Remembering Jackson's lessons, she took a half breath, steadied her hands, and fired twice in rapid succession, hitting the intruder in the chest. He fell backward, revealing another man behind him, a tall figure with a scar from lip to jaw. Silas Fisher. Well, well, he drawled. Rebecca Morgan. Fancy meeting you here. You followed me, she said, the gun steady in her hands. A debt's a debt, sweetheart. Your daddy owed me, and now you do. A shot rang out from outside, and Silas ducked. Jackson appeared behind him, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Get away from my family, Jackson growled, his rifle aimed at Silas's head. Silas smiled coldly. Your family. This woman's nothing but a thief. Ask her what she stole from me. The moment hung between them like a suspended bullet. Then more gunfire erupted from the bunkhouse, and Silas disappeared into the chaos. When the attack ended, 2 of Jackson's men were wounded, one of the ranch hands dead. The Fishers had retreated, but everyone knew they would return. Inside the house, Jackson turned to Rebecca, his expression hard. You want to tell me how Silas Fisher knows you? Rebecca's hands trembled as she put down the gun. My father borrowed money from him in Boston. When father died, Silas came to collect from me instead. And you ran? Yes. Jackson paced the room, his injured shoulder stiff. You brought this danger to my door, to my daughter. I didn't know he had followed me, Rebecca said, tears threatening. I'll leave at first light. And go where? Anywhere. I won't put you in danger any longer. Jackson stopped pacing. You shot a man today to protect my daughter. Rebecca met his gaze. I did what needed doing. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Jackson nodded. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. Over the next few days, a subtle shift occurred between them. Jackson began including Rebecca in the ranch's defense plans. He showed her the best positions to fire from if the house was attacked, taught her how to bar the doors properly, and introduced her to the ranch's secret, a root cellar that could serve as a last refuge, stocked with water, food, and ammunition. At meals, he started asking her opinion on matters of the ranch, whether to replant the south field, how to manage the remaining horses. Small things, but Rebecca recognized them for what they were, the beginnings of trust. And Sarah bloomed under Rebecca's care. The child followed her everywhere, learning to bake bread, to mend clothing, to identify useful herbs in the kitchen garden. At night, Rebecca would brush the girl's hair and tell her stories of the East, of tall buildings and bustling streets, but also of quiet libraries and the smell of books. One evening, as Rebecca read to Sarah by the fire, she glanced up to find Jackson watching them. Something soft in his normally hard eyes. When their gazes met, he didn't look away. You're good with her, he said later as Sarah slept. She makes it easy, Rebecca replied. She's remarkable. Like her mother, Jackson said quietly, then added, and like you. The compliment warmed Rebecca more than the fire. But morning never came peacefully. Rebecca, unable to sleep, noticed shadows moving outside her window. The Fisher gang had returned, silently surrounding the house while the ranch slept. She could wake Jackson, alert the ranch hands, but that would mean a firefight with Sarah caught in the middle. Or she could face her past alone. Rebecca dressed quickly, tucked Jackson's revolver into her coat pocket, and slipped downstairs. She paused only to leave a note and kiss Sarah's forehead as the child slept. Outside, she confronted Silas directly, stepping into the yard with her hands raised. I'm what you want, she called. Leave these people alone. Silas emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 men. Finally showing some sense, Rebecca. I'll go with you peacefully, she said. But we ride now, away from here. Silas studied her suspiciously, then nodded. Mount up. As they rode away from the ranch, Rebecca looked back once at the place that, for a brief moment, had felt like it could be home. She had a plan. lead them far from the ranch, then use what Jackson had taught her. She patted the revolver in her pocket. Jackson woke to Sarah's screams. "She's gone! Papa, she's gone!" The note on the table was brief. "They came for me. Not for you. Keep Sarah safe." Cold fury and something else, fear perhaps, gripped Jackson's heart. He gathered his men, divided them into two groups, one to defend the ranch, one to ride with him. "She sacrificed herself for us," he told Taylor. "I won't let her face them alone." The trail was easy to follow. Too easy. Silas wanted to be followed, wanted Jackson to pursue them into the mountains where an ambush could be set. The storm had cleared, leaving a crystal blue sky in bitter cold. Jackson led his men through narrow passes and around blind corners, every sense alert for the trap he knew was waiting. They found the first body near a frozen creek, one of Silas's men, a bullet hole precisely between his eyes. The man's coat and ammunition were missing. "She's fighting back," Jackson murmured, pride mixing with concern. The second body lay a mile farther on, sprawled beside his horse, again shot with precision. "Who is this woman?" Taylor whispered. "Someone who belongs with us," Jackson replied. In the past weeks, he had watched Rebecca transform from a desperate woman at a train station to someone who could defend herself and others. Someone who fit into his world in ways he hadn't expected. Someone he was no longer willing to lose. The ambush came in a narrow canyon. Gunfire erupted from the rocks above, downing one of Jackson's men instantly. Jackson took a bullet in the thigh, but managed to find cover behind a boulder. "There!" Taylor shouted, pointing to a cave entrance high on the canyon wall. "Movement!" Jackson spotted Rebecca, crouched in the cave mouth, exchanging fire with two of Silas's men on the opposite ridge. Her stolen coat was torn and bloody, but her aim was steady, just as he had taught her. "Cover me," Jackson ordered, then began climbing toward her position, ignoring the fire that tore through his injured leg with each step. He reached her just as Silas appeared at the cave entrance, gun drawn. "Well now," Silas sneered, "ain't this touching?" Jackson raised his rifle, but his wounded leg gave way. He stumbled, the gun wavering. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She fired twice, one shot striking Silas in the chest, the other in the throat. The outlaw staggered backward, his expression one of shocked disbelief, then toppled over the edge of the cliff. Silence fell across the canyon. One by one, the remaining members of the Fisher gang fled or surrendered. Jackson looked at Rebecca, snow in her hair and determination in her eyes. "You saved us all." "You came for me," she replied simply. "Yes," he said, "and I'd do it again." As he bandaged her wounds with strips torn from his shirt, Jackson spoke words he'd kept buried since Anna died. "I thought I'd never let anyone close again. Thought it was safer that way." Rebecca winced as he tightened the bandage. "And now? Now I know better. Alone isn't safer." "It's just alone." Spring came late to the Wyoming Territory that year. The snow melted slowly, revealing green shoots beneath. At the Reed Ranch, new life emerged as well. Jackson built a new stable, larger than before. Rebecca expanded the vegetable garden and taught Sarah to identify medicinal herbs. The Fisher gang, now leaderless, had scattered to the winds. On a warm evening in May, Rebecca stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Jackson joined her, limping slightly from his healing wound. "I have something for you," he said, holding out a small box. Inside lay a finely crafted Colt Lightning double-action revolver with pearl grips. "This is a woman's gun," he explained. 5 shots of .38 caliber. Easier to handle than the Smith & Wesson, but just as deadly at close range. "It's beautiful," Rebecca said, lifting it carefully. The weapon fit her hand perfectly. "This is the West," Jackson said quietly. "My woman needs to know how to protect herself." Rebecca smiled at the words. My woman. Sarah asked if she could call you mother today. Jackson continued. I told her she'd have to ask you herself. And what would you call me? Rebecca asked. Jackson took her hand. Wife, if you'll have me. Not because of Sarah's letter, not because of convenience, but because these months have shown me who you are. Strong, brave, loyal. The kind of woman a man would be proud to build a life with. There was no formal wedding, no white dress or preacher. Just a simple dinner Rebecca prepared, with Sarah placing wildflowers on the table. The ranch hands stood as witnesses, and Taylor, ordained during his cavalry days, spoke the simple words that joined them. That night, Jackson and Rebecca sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. His rifle and her new revolver rested side by side against the wall, a fitting symbol of their union. I never answered that advertisement, Jackson said, but I'm glad Sarah did. Some things are meant to be, even when they start with a child's meddling. Rebecca leaned against his shoulder. Some of the best things in life come unexpected. As they stood watching the moon rise, a rider approached at full gallop, the telegraph operator from town, waving an urgent message. Mr. Reed, he called. News from Dodge City. The Fisher gang has a new leader. Silas's brother Thomas is gathering men. They're saying he's coming for revenge. Jackson and Rebecca exchanged a determined look. The past never stayed buried for long in this harsh land, but now they would face it together. Get the men ready, Jackson told Taylor, who had appeared at the commotion. Double the sentries, check the ammunition. Rebecca retrieved her revolver from the wall. I'll prepare the root cellar. Sarah knows where to hide if trouble comes. Jackson nodded, a grim smile forming. Let them come, he said, his arm around Rebecca's waist. This time, we're ready.